Hello and welcome to VGC's Reviewers Roundtable for Horizon Forbidden West. I am Jordan Midler of VGC and I'm joined by Hamish Black from the YouTube channel Writing on Games. How are you getting on, Hamish?
I'm doing all right, man. I am exhausted from trying to put together my own review of this game, but
Yep.
I have managed to drag myself away from an editing suite for long enough to talk casually as opposed to robotically in a script. So it's fun.
Yeah. So I think it's probably best to start basing this on, we generally have quite different tastes in games, especially when it comes to kind of like the larger kind of first party titles specifically. We've had a lot of
Sure.
disagreements, but from what I've heard kind of through the grapevine directly from you, you're pretty into Horizon Forbidden West. What do you think of it? What do you think of it?
So I mean it's a kind of slightly long story in the sense that for about 6 or 7 hours I was kind of thinking like I have softened to the kind of big Sony like cinematic, action open world experience in the last kind of year or so. Like it's fine. And I was kind of
Yeah.
thinking like there was a point in time where I was thinking like I'm gonna make a video called, it's why it's pointless to review Horizon Forbidden West, because you know exactly what this fucking is, and you know already, you see one trailer, you see one screenshot, you know if you're going to like it, you know if you're like, and then something happened, and this is a thing that I like. I mean, I should also say like I bounced off the first game
Mm,
hard, like because when that came out, it was released right next to 10 out of 10 game Breath of the fucking Wild.
never heard of it.
But like, yeah, just like like, I love Breath of the Wild, and the kind of emphasis on exploratory, freedom and stuff made the kind of comparatively limited scope of Zero Dawn feel all the more restrictive. Uh, and then but so something clicked around the 6 or 7 hour mark, and I'm not sure. Can we talk about the Cauldrons?
Yes, I believe so. To be
Okay.
fair, for a Sony embargo, it is very kind of open. The only things
Yeah.
we can't talk about are like genuine big spoilers. So
Yeah.
you can definitely talk about that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah. So I was basically I'd been riding through the desert for, for God knows how long, and then I come across this, um, you know, this thing called a cauldron, which is essentially where machines get made and stuff, or where machines did get made. I don't really know the whole thing, because I didn't get far enough in the first one to really get to those bits or whatever. Um, and suddenly the desert and environment I've been riding through, the kind of very pretty but barren desert environment, turns into this fucking real world of the Matrix esque, like hellscape where I'm like navigating these kind of like jagged jutting, like vents and hard
Yeah,
drives or whatever and I was like, this rules, and it's kind of like it's visually stunning, but also like mechanically interesting, because I can like kind of go wherever I want here, and yet it's still like incredibly claustrophobic, and the enemies are really tough, and I got out of that cauldron having beaten the kind of goal of it, thinking like, wow, I've actually, I breathed a sigh of relief. I was like, fuck, I appreciate the splendor of this world like so much more
mm,
now. Um, so yeah, and after that, I started noticing like, oh, I can like kind of climb a lot more things than I could in the first game. I
yeah.
can glide off the top of that mountain that I just climbed up, and that's really fun. Um, so yeah, I'm actually really interested to know your thoughts on this, because I was thinking that, wow, now we have a big Sony cinematic action game that is taking far more cues from Breath of the Wild, and it's so much better for it.
Sure. I mean, it's worth pointing out like the things that Horizon do slightly differently. Horizon does slightly differently in this one. You have a glider which has been shown off in pre-release materials. You get that fairly early on. It really speeds you through the process of getting all the tools in your arsenal to be like fully equipped, because obviously being a sequel, it has to do kind of minimal everything you already knew you've forgotten suddenly kind of stuff. It kind of justifies that somewhat, but then it gets really good at just giving you everything. And the shield wing's part of that, and also, as you say, there's a lot more like sheer cliff faces you can climb. I actually found that you could kind of Skyrim up most things. You could just kind of jump, and Aloy would kind of make her way. That wasn't the most like smooth experience ever, but I think the emphasis on, especially in the kind of open world, the verticality, you'll find a lot of areas that are a lot higher, specifically because they know as soon as you're done this kind of platforming puzzle and you get to the top, you can just launch yourself off. So I do see there are cues from Breath of the Wild in that sense. And also, kind of skipping ahead, did you notice that when you finish the game, like even if you're lightly exploding or even moderately exploding, there's so much of the map that you never touch through the course of the main game. And I thought that was a really interesting change, because it felt like in the first one, it basically took you on a tour through the entire game, whereas that whole area in the west of the map, the one that they've shown in pre-release, the one that is the cover, that kind of San Francisco-esque area, you barely touch it. You go in it for like an hour's worth of time and you miss. There are camps there to miss. There's a whole tribe there with its own story that you can completely miss. So I thought that was kind of an interesting change. What did you think in terms of, obviously the combat in this game is very similar to the first. Was that an element of the first game you enjoyed, or is it still something that isn't really working with you in the second one?
So it's kind of a mixed bag. I think that the melee combat in particular, I kind of suffered from the Witcher syndrome, where it's like it's very closely tied to, kind of elaborate animations that kind of also lack impact or precision. So it kind of becomes a mess, and like it was locking on to like weird enemies and stuff that I wasn't trying to target. But I think the kind of the more strategic element of combat in this in the first game, when you're like laying traps and you're trying to like gauge, the like every single encounter before you actually go into it, you're kind of like scanning your environment, seeing where can I place traps, like where can I do that, like that stuff's like I found that really enjoyable, combined with the fact that I now have these extra traversal options where I can like scan a massive rock face and think, okay, I can climb that now, and escape for a bit, and then like jump down and slam one of the machines, and like there's I found that the traversal aspects that they've updated added a lot more strategic kind of excitement that made up for the kind of melee combat's lack of precision or weight. So,
yeah. It felt almost like the melee combat was like missing a step to it. Like it felt like there should have been like an almost Batman like parry that just isn't part of it, especially when enemies can block with melee and can parry and stuff like that. I just felt like, why isn't that part of Aloy's arsenal? I found myself using the melee as part of like a combo chain a lot, so I would start with a couple of melee hits and then immediately pull out the kind of quick shot bow. But I do think the melee is especially compared to the bow combat, which I think is amazing, and it's still so much fun, like the act of taking all the pieces off a machine, like strategically like ripping all the kind of the exterior and then going after weak spots. I think that's all great. And then when you compare that to the melee combat is a bit weak. I also found that you have so many kind of options from range. Like you have several different types of bows, you have the slingshot and things like this, and I just didn't find myself using all of it, because about halfway through the game, half of my kind of weapon wheel was bows with every type of like elemental damage, so I didn't find myself needing to set up elaborate traps or anything like that anymore. Whereas at the start of the game, the machines felt really dangerous and I was getting killed a lot. But there's a bit of a tipping point in the middle where as soon as you unlock the ability to notch up a few arrows at once, you become so powerful, and I don't think I died from there until the end.
You see, that's interesting, because I this is part of my thing. Like, I didn't know if maybe this was me kind of like playing the game wrong or something. At a certain point, I got like I can't remember what they're called. They're like the shot casters or something like that. where it's just basically a fucking machine gun.
Yeah.
And I was like, all right. I had one with like plasma and shock and acid and all this other stuff, and I was like, right, I'm fucking going Call of Duty on this, lads. But like, you know, I was still having to like, you know, manufacture traps on the fly, and I was still having to like craft ammo, like the I guess the ammo requirements for like, or the resource requirements to craft ammo for those guns is probably a bit higher than they are for like the other bows or whatever. But you know, I was getting like those, you know, like the sniper bow and all that kind of stuff, and I was like, I have no use for this at this point, like, or very little. You know, I think I used it once in the mission that I was given it or something, and then I was like, right, no, I want more guns.
See, that's interesting to me, because I always found it. I started playing a bit of a game myself where it was like, how few arrows can I take to take down like a Thunderjaw, for example? Like,
Right,
can I set up this chain reaction, especially when you start getting perks that are like deal 50% more damage when you're in stealth and things like that. So kind of that skill tree it's intimidating, because there's like 6 channels to it, and they're all like 25 kind of skills deep. The actual things you get in it, I found, were like very good. Like they were all fun, and it allows you to ignore stuff that you're never going to touch, which is always a win in my book. Like I was able to fill up the hunter skill tree, which is mainly focused on bows, and then just kind of mess around with the others when it was necessary. But specifically stuff like, so you'll gain valor as you kind of fight, and then you can hold L1 and press R1, and that's the animation you've seen where it like zooms in Aloy's face and stuff like that, and it's all kind of anime, and all those kind of all those powers are great. I wish the button to deploy that wasn't open the weapon wheel and then press R1. Like, it feels like it could have been a lot smoother. Like, I feel like I want to deploy it in the middle of a difficult bit, not pull up the weapon wheel.
That's an interesting point, because I found that with a lot of stuff, especially with the guns that I was mentioning earlier, where it's the reload button is square while you're aiming. So, but like she didn't respond immediately, so I always just have this thing where I'm fucking hammering on square, trying to like load the fucking gun, and she's just like crouching because square's the crouch button, and I'm like, for fuck's sake. So yeah, that was that. Yeah, so there's probably a little like, you know, weirdness in terms of like the way the inputs are mapped that was maybe a little unintuitive, I suppose you could say. But I mean, like, you know, this is all like, I feel like that's, you know, pretty like compared to like the kind of totality of my experience with that game. Like, I came away from it honestly thinking like this is maybe one of the most like fully realized open world games I've played since since Breath of the Wild, you know, like where because I just felt that you know, the one thing I really loved about it was the fact that compared to even like so many other Sony big name titles where you have the climbing sequence where in like God of War or Ghost of Tsushima, where it's like you go up and you hit the right handholds and stuff that are just very conveniently placed along it. Whereas here, it was like there were even in the more rigid objectives where I was trying to get to the other end of you know, a room in one of the kind of higher tech bits, and you know, there's all this like kind of old world, you know, tech and stuff like just jutting out the ground awkwardly, and I was like following what I thought was the path and getting to these bits where I was like, oh, I'm just like this just kind of led nowhere, and I have to go back, and that's a challenge in itself, you know. And but like, you know, you might think that's kind of like awkward, but actually it was like, okay, the game is letting me get kind of lost here, which makes figuring out the path all the more satisfying. You know, it was really cool. I liked that aspect of it. I liked the fact that the game allowed you to get lost, and you were talking about the kind of like Skyrimming your way up mountains before. Like, yes, I pull an interview from like last year with one of the developers who was saying like, oh, the climbing you can free climb everywhere, and it's like, that's not actually true. There are plenty of things that you think you would be able to climb that you can't, but you can still kind of like jimmy your way up there, which is like, it's still it still feels like you've earned something when you get to the top, and you still get the reward of being able to like glide down for minutes at a time, and you get these stunning vistas, because it's also one of the most fucking gorgeous games
Yeah, it's insane.
I've ever played.
I don't get it. Like I actually, it's absolutely. There was so many times where I was like calling my partner and being like, "This is what games look like now." This is between
Yeah.
the colors and the vistas and the facial animation, which is just
Yeah.
ridiculous. Like it is
Yeah,
so good. I don't get how this is a cross-gen game. Like it doesn't fully make sense to me how it's a cross-gen game. Obviously, there's the favor performance and favor quality, which is, as far as I'm aware, favor performance is 60 frames a second at that kind of like adaptive 1440p thing they do quite a lot, where it's like it will change, it's like dynamic resolution, and then the favor quality is 4K and at 30. And I would often find myself just flipping over to that at a particularly nice looking bit and just be
yeah,
like,
yeah.
oh, this is what it looks like with all the bells and whistles on. Obviously, for combat, you want the 60 frames a second, but yeah, it's an insane looking game.
Yeah, it's properly like I mean for one, you know, one of my like I had a weird problem with the faces in the original where, you know, they were like, they were very for the time they were like very cleanly rendered, but there was a kind of like weird alien, like they all kind of smiled a bit with their teeth, and so every conversation was a bit like,
Yeah,
you know, and like it looked really fucking strange, man. But like now I was like, oh, they actually fixed that, and this is like this all these characters look really good.
yeah,
But like, you know, the star of the show is like the environments and what they do with them, because there are like, I don't say this lightly, there are like sites in this game that I was getting, you know, like constantly, like, you know, one after the other, where I was like, I don't think I've seen this in a video game before. Like,
yeah,
it was I was frequently stunned, like
yeah,
which is, you know, I'm not a guy that's like wowed by, you know, oh, the graphical fidelity is so good on this, you know, like that's not typically the kind of thing I value, which is partly why I don't usually gravitate towards like Sony's big games, because it's like, you know, when you actually break down beyond the kind of Hollywood sheen, or, you know, like Hollywood-esque sheen that's on these
yeah,
games, you know, like, yeah, I don't really connect with the game there, and that's the important thing. But here it was like, you know, the gameplay is amazing, and it's also bolstered by the fact that you're just exploring this unspeakably beautiful environment that is just constantly giving you like I mean, also you mentioned earlier like the fact that you don't get to like the actual west of the map that was in all the fucking trailers until like I was about like 25 hours in or something like
yep,
that. It was something crazy before I actually got there. And you know, and again, it was just one of these things where I I'd worked. It felt like I'd worked to get there, and so it felt even more of a reward when I was just like staring out at this like vast, gorgeous ocean with the, you know, the remnants of like, you know, bridges and stuff like that in the distance, and skyscrapers, and like it's just it's. I mean, there's also there, you know, a lot of the best things in that regard are things we flatly can't talk about.
yeah.
Um, you know, there are things in this game that like it does that I was like, holy fucking shit! Like,
It's like
this is
it's like
insane.
you think that the West is the reveal. You think that like
Yeah,
San
yeah, yes,
Francisco and
yeah.
all that is the reveal, and they're like, no, that's the reason we've shown it so much, because that is not the reveal. Like there is,
Yeah.
it gets into like I mean, it doesn't quite go like Raiden Metal Gear Solid 2 in terms of like how crazy the expectation to execution is, but all that stuff is really just worth experiencing. Just to circle back around on the environments, for me the gold standard of environmental design in terms of realism is still Red Dead 2, just because there are
Yeah.
so many moments where you just look out and you're like, this is beyond anything that's ever been achieved. Like the moment when you get into kind of the redwood forest, and
Mhm.
when you just get into the west, that is one of the closest I've ever moments I've ever had to feeling like this feels like Red Dead 2, because it's so dense and the light is just flying through all these different massive trees, and it's just, it made me, if you didn't have the map to open and see like, okay, I'm getting quite close to the coast, you would like, this goes on forever. Like it feels so huge, and they condense three US states, like really close to each other. But even then, the map just feels enormous. Like it feels like it's genuinely sprawling. And I think sometimes that works against the game. I think in a game like Far Cry 6, it's the worst thing in the world that this map goes on for a million years. But when you're talking about one of the entire themes is how far Aloy is going from Meridian and going from the Nora clan, like to feel like you're just going and going and going all the way as far west as you can possibly go, and feeling the kind of the change in how this world is reacting or has reacted to this new world. Because in the far west, it's far more, because it's still industrialized, there is the tips of skyscrapers because they've all fallen into the sea, so that affects how that world is. The desert's also obviously desperate for water. It's all it plays with that stuff in a way that I found much more interesting. The mission, we can technically talk about it, but I don't really want to talk about it.
Yeah.
We'll say the mission in the middle area where
Yes.
you go underwater for a long time.
Yeah.
I thought that was really stunning, and I thought that was something that I was like, okay, they're making use of the fact that this used to be the real world.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. I mean, I think the way that it's not even just that it's like, the objects of the old world are being, they're like, oh, this was what it was used for, but now, like, we are so far beyond, like, what, that, I think that mission is actually, like, a good example of, like, it really feels like an act of archaeology when you're, like, uncovering this stuff. And there's another section that, like, that feels kind of similar, where it's, I will say it's like, it's a gym that you're going to, and like what they do with that is like, I won't say, but it's like, I was kind of, my mind was blown there. But like the moment that it really struck me was actually quite near the start, where, I mean, it's like right at the start basically, where you see like the space shuttle, and it's like, this is a thing that in our world is like, at one point was like this cutting edge thing of a symbol of exploration beyond what we currently know. And in the world of Forbidden West, it is little more than a club to bat down some snakes. It's like, I love the way that they just kind of casually just kind of weave in the fact that like so much time has passed that like, I think it speaks to like the way the game handles its larger themes as well, which I have my issues with the story, which we'll get onto, but I do like the fact that they can reference like very current cultural anxieties without kind of like avoiding the hokiness that you can sometimes get when you very directly kind of pander to that. Like, this is a game that kind of talks about, it's not just about like climate change, it's about like all the sociological things around climate change. It's like labor politics, the cults of personalities around fucking tech weirdos looking to the stars and all that stuff. But it takes those things to such a like again, so much time has passed that these things have gained their own like religious spiritual fervor around them, that like it at times it goes into like outright camp, which is like a much better way to me to like to explore that stuff. I mean, I guess if we're if I'm talking about the story now, my main problem with it is the rest, where it's like, where it's just, it's all just, you can see like you can experience like some of the most like mind-blowing shit, and then you'll get 40 minutes of a reverse shot conversation with two drones just monotonously explaining what's going on and exactly the state of the world and everything like that. And at a certain point I was just like skipping over most of it, like anything that wasn't just directly moving the plot forward. I was just like, what did you think of the story?
I talk about it a bit in my review. Like it gets to a point where the story very much grabs you and goes, okay, we're leaving all of this kind of low level inter-tribe kind of warfare behind. Like we're not going to feel like, the game does let you, all those characters from those story, well, most of them become like side missions that you can go and explore, and I had a great time doing that. But it very much felt like I'll come back to you once this massive thing that we are skirting around, once this
Yes.
once this massive thing is happening, like as you say, it feels like you just want to, and I think that plays into the idea that when you finish the game, you'll open the map and there will just be like a line through half of it where that's the only place you've went for like the main story, and then the rest is grayed out, because it does, it gives you that kind of tease of the end of this game and the end of this story. You need to see what is happening kind of a wee bit earlier than I think it should. I think it would have been better to let you go west and kind of really embed yourself in there for a while, because by the time I got to the west and I knew what we were ramping up to, or at least I got the impression of what we were ramping up to, it was like, I can't get involved in this really low level kind of local politics, kind of really small side mission stuff until this massive major thing is done. And I do get that it's hard to sit through the short reverse shot, which they do for all their in-game stuff. I think the cinematography of like the pre-rendered stuff all looks amazing, but all the in-game stuff is very, it's like that Fallout 4 kind of that kind of short reverse shot kind of camera angle. I think that does lose steam, but I would say that as soon as you're done with the main quest, like all that stuff is still there and it's still good. And I found a lot of stuff, a lot of bespoke stuff that I could have been playing then, but the main story, which I liked the story of the first game, but I didn't think it was anywhere near as strong as this one, and it's nowhere near as interesting as this one. The main story was really like, I just have to know, like they have dangled this thing literally in front of me, because I got to a certain elevation and you see a thing and you're like, what the fuck, what is the state of this world, like what is going on? That is so enticing, and I think they pretty much stick the landing for that. Is very gamey, the way they stick the landing, like the way it all wraps up is very gamey, but I think the actual narrative the narrative wrap up is satisfying without being like kind of mind blowing, if you get me.
I think I was maybe slightly less impressed with I found the ending to be like very anticlimactic. Just because I think it's because, like you say, it's a very gamey way to wrap this up, and I'm trying to like figure out a way to like word this without actually talking about it.
Is it because they offer a way that this ends that would have been unbelievable that they never actually execute on?
I don't know. I think maybe it is just the fact that like it feels like there's a lot. It feels like there's a lot more story to be told. Is what I think. And like, and I mean that in like, I don't just mean that in terms of, you know, the stuff that's still available to explore and do once you finish the game. I mean in terms of that main narrative, it's like the stakes are so it's kind of hard to convey. Like I had so actually the point at which the game like really clicked for me that I was talking about earlier, like it was the Cauldron kind of wrapped up with a couple of main missions, like, you know, at a fairly early point in the game still, where I came out just being like, what the how are you all caring about this trivial shit? Like, what, that guy doesn't like this guy, who gives a fuck, man? Like,
look at this thing, like look what is happening, look at that thing.
And those stakes are like so like consistently high, and they like they only get bigger after a certain point, and then like it gets to the end. Like I really like found that I got to that final mission and I was like, oh, we're here already. You know, I can't really like go into details on it, but it was, you know, it was just a bit like, oh, okay. I mean, you know, it wasn't like, it didn't ruin the game by any means. Cause my thing was that, you know, I felt like the conversations that you were having that kind of explained the world felt like really constrained and really blinkered compared to just the world itself, which is right there. So I was like, I found that the much more interesting stories were just found during exploration anyway. Like, you know, it like a weird thing about this game to me was that I found that, you know, the way you learn about the open world is super organic, because you're just kind of discovering, like, you know, I think that's the reason that the you know, when you zoom out the map and you figure out how fucking big this is, like, it's different from a Far Cry or something, because Far Cry is such a mechanic, like, it's so numbers driven, it's so like, you have a bigger gun than this guy, and
Yeah.
like it's just it, you clear this base, and that's, it's a base full of people. Whereas here you're really like uncovering a kind of grander ecology,
Yeah.
and like, there's so much biodiversity and like the way that these machines interact with each other and everything. And like, so, even just like minute stealth encounters kind of became these weird research missions in a way, where I was like, okay, I've never seen that machine before, and it's interacting with this machine in a way that's like, like what, and that machine's like quicker to startle than this one. And like, so you kind of develop this kind of evolving picture of how these beasts work with each other, and like that's really interesting, and led to some like, really emergent moments of like me getting caught in by an enemy I didn't expect to be like so dangerous, and then having to like run away and getting caught by this massive fucking thing. So like that was the more interesting thing to me in terms of like learning how this world works, rather than just having it explained like, well, this is this and this is that and this is this, and it was just a skip. So yeah, I don't know. That was kind of how I felt about like the world and stuff. But so I mean, I guess when you were playing it, did you do a lot of the side quests along the way, or were you just kind of like beelining the story?
So my litmus test for side quests generally is like, if this was real, would Aloy take the time right now to stop this thing that she's doing to go and do them? So I did a few that seemed like kind of key, or some that were like, oh, that's an interesting area of the map I've never been to, or stuff to that effect. But I didn't do tons of them. It's split into like, there's side quests which are generally kind of multi-layered, multi-objective things. There are errands which are very small, kind of really short side quests. But yeah, there's stuff like, you can find a person in the desert that like has some of the last working kind of radio transmissions in the West, and I thought that's a great conceit for a mission. Like, I'd like to see this kind of short mission play out. But did I know you found yourself at some point just kind of mainlining the quest, but in those early areas, were you kind of mopping up, or were you just kind of moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, so I was actually, I mean, in the early hours especially, I was kind of, I was just trying to kind of take in the world, and like I said earlier, I was having kind of a pleasant enough experience with this open world and everything. And then it just became like, after a certain point, it became much more like, it became less about doing side quests, which, the actual side quests themselves are rarely go beyond simply, go to here, fetch this thing or whatever.
Yeah.
I just liked going off the beaten path in the same way I did with Breath of the Wild, where I was like, oh, I'm going over here, and there's this like bridge here that's leading up this fucking mountain, and I go up here, and there's a whole other, subset of, like whatever's going on that I couldn't have anticipated, and it leads me on this whole other like journey of learning about how the old world stuff functions in this part of the map versus another part of the map and everything like that. And it's like, so that was, I guess, like, side stuff is maybe not the way to put it for me. It was just like a lot of, I'm just going to wander over here and see what's here, because at the very least I'm going to get like a really stunning view out of it,
Yeah.
which is a real testament to how good the world design is and how good the traversal mechanics are. Because it always feels like, because you were mentioning, again, we're talking about like, the size of the map and everything, like it always felt kind of eminently manageable to me.
Yeah.
Because I was always discovering something new. I was always like finding something out about the state of the world. And you can fast travel and stuff like very easily, but it's like, it's in that sweet spot where it doesn't feel like a cheat, but you also kind of have the option of just going your own way, and that feels good too.
Yeah.
So it was the best of all worlds. It really like rekindled a love of like good open world games.
Me
where
too.
I was like, yeah.
That was I've been really down on open world generally, like for a while now, because I've just had a bad string of them. But it was like a reminder of, when this is done properly, and done with the restraint not to just litter the map with useless shit over and over again. Like, it has stuff that people would qualify as open world fluff, but instead of making that all of the things on the map, that's about 10%. The things that are on the map are all these new machines that you can go and hunt. Like, that is like such a big focus, and I think that it's just, I was really impressed by it, kind of top to bottom. I have maybe some minor issues with it, but it's the kind of thing that I need to try and think to myself, like, what part of this isn't working, or what part of this don't I like? And after like 5 minutes, I'm like, this pure doesn't matter. Like, the bigger picture in terms of like, the gameplay is great, the story's really interesting, the world's brilliant, it's stunning looking, like, it's a really complete package. And I think in my review, I liken it to, or I talk about the fact that the gold standard is Assassin's Creed to Assassin's Creed 2. And while I don't think it replaces that analogy in terms of jump in quality, it gives that feeling of a team that, now that they've made one of these big open world games, now that they're making their second one, it's so much more well realized and so much more, it doesn't just feel like it's throwing everything at the wall. So to kind of wrap up, what is your kind of top line impression of Horizon Forbidden West?
I think it is largely the same as you, where it's like the totality of the experience overrides any kind of small problems I have with it. Like, for example, you know, I had a lot of technical instability on my end. I don't know if you were the same. Even kind of post patch, I was experiencing.
Oh, really? That's interesting.
So
I'd heard through the grapevine of another reviewer having similar issues, and it made me like, it gaslit me somewhat to the point where I was like, am I just not seeing this? Like, I know that the only time there's occasional really long vistas where some stuff won't draw in properly from like miles and miles away, but I didn't have any like big kind of technical foibles.
I can send you some footage in a bit.
Good.
I'll show you exactly what I'm talking. I've seen some wild glitches in this game, but the thing is, look, I'm not like, a game needs to be like 100%.
Yeah.
Like, a game can have, like, a game of this scope, you can excuse a few things here and there that are like, you know, maybe, but even then, it's like, when I think about like, you know, it's kind of a little technically unstable, the melee combat wasn't great. It's like you say, it's like, these are all like very small elements compared to like the grander vision of what this game is.
Yeah.
Which is, you know, to me, it's the most enthralled I've been with an open world since Breath of the Wild, and like, that is a big thing for me. It brings back all the kind of the wonder and the awe and the kind of childlike like excitement to see like the feelings of being dwarfed by your environment and all that kind of stuff. Like, all that stuff that the open world genre should evoke and hasn't done for a long time because of annualization and the kind of template structure that you get with it all. So I came away from it thinking like, this is a really special game, and considering my history with not liking Sony's big, or, you know, like, not liking strong, but, you know, it like having my issues with Sony's like big cinematic, you know, massive budget output, like, for me to come away thinking like, this is really something special, I think, you know, kind of speaks for itself.
Yes. Well, Hamish, thank you very much for joining me. We will have a full review on your channel. Is that the plan?
Yes, I'm going to get back to editing. I'll probably be up all night doing that to get it ready for the fucking embargo. But yeah, no, thank you very much for having me. It's been great talking to you.
I mean, of course, the first time I talked to you on this platform about a big game like this, when I'm dying for an argument, because that's me and you talking about games is when the sparks flies. But this is the time that we suddenly agree. It's just it's
not Descenders that can fuck off, man.
You mean the terrible Riders Republic clone? Well, now that Hamish has permanently left, Thank you very much for watching. There is a full review and full video review of Horizon Forbidden West on VGC. Be sure to subscribe to the channel for more reviewer roundtables for big titles like this. Till next time, I'm Jordan Midler. I'll see you later from Hamish.
Goodbye.
See you next time.